Hello, I'm Natalie Graham and this is the Sunday Politics in the South East. Coming up later, similar towns with the same problems, but why did Labour win 7 out of 8 county council seats in Hastings, but only 1 out of 8 in Thanet? Joining me in the studio today is the Conservative MP for Rochester and Strood, Mark Reckless, and Labour peer Lord Bassam of Brighton. Welcome to you both. Now, a year ago this month, the government-backed Portus Town scheme was launched, with Margate and Dartford among the first 12 places receiving up to £100,000 each to rejuvenate their high streets. Now, this week, the television programme Mary, Queen of the High Street highlighted the efforts made so far in Margate. But the programme, starring Mary Portas, of course, didn't go down well, with former members of the town team who complained about the way they were portrayed. The Thanet North MP, Roger Gale, called it a vanity project for the presenter. So, Mark, first of all, do you think this was a vanity project or actually a deserving way of spending government money?
Well, I think it was trying out a new idea to revitalise some of our town centres, and there's 12 of them, and I guess in some it will have worked, and Mary Portas will have come up with good ideas, and the local authority have been able to implement them. And I'm sorry if that hasn't worked in all of them, but I do hope people will visit Margate. You know, it's well
the danger is you have a very high profile celebrity, for want of a better word, who gets involved a relatively small amount of money, and that's the danger, isn't it? It becomes hijacked arguably by her.
But I think also a danger for her, because she has a reputation, and if people are going around complaining about and are happy it's not being followed up. So I'd, say to Mary Portas, listen to what's happening and see what you can do to work with Margate to make things work.
Steve, I gather Brighton got a bit of money. Funny that of all places, Brighton should need it for.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think they wanted to spend it around the lanes, but what can you do with £100,000? It's a bit of a gimmick, really. And I don't begrudge Portas's involvement. I think it's a good thing, actually, because it focused on retail, and that's a good slice of Brighton and Hove business. But I don't think it's had the impact it needs to, and I think really if we're serious about city centre regeneration, then we have to have a long-term plan and invest proper money into it.
OK, we'll leave it there for now. Euroscepticism appears to be alive and well in Kent and Sussex. 9 of our MPs, including Mark, voted in favour of an amendment to the Queen's speech on the EU referendum earlier this week. But would leaving the European Union cost us more than we would gain? Joining us from our Oxford studio is the Lib Dem MEP, Catherine Bearder. Now, Catherine, you've obviously got a vested interest in our membership in the EU, but you claim we'd lose 500,000 jobs in the wider South East region if we left the EU. Where did you get that figure from?
Well, it's not my figure, it's the Department of Business that have come up with this figure. But it is very difficult to come up with a figure, but we have a lot of inward investment for that, investment from outside Europe who come to the UK knowing that they understand English here and the rest of it, but it's an into the European market, which is the free market. So if we were to withdraw from that, we would lose that inward investment. We would then also not have trade deals with all the countries that the European Union has trade deals with, and that's not just general trade deals, that's specialist trade deals on tropical timber or on anti-dumping deals that we have with the countries that want to dump their stuff.
Just getting back to that statistic, because that is a sort of headline that was banded around this week, 500,000 jobs. You said yourself it's difficult to pin it down, and that's one of the problems you have. I think that Department Skills, Innovation and Business statistic was extrapolated from a 2006 report. So it's hard to say 500,000 jobs, isn't it?
Have also tried to get the figure, but it's more than just jobs. It's the cultural funding, the cultural mixing, the right for Brits to go and live on the mainland in Europe, as it is for Europeans to come and work here. And in Kent, more than anywhere in this southeast region, there are people from all over Europe who like to live in Kent and commute to work in Paris or Brussels or wherever. Okay. So it's leaving would cut us off. We get a lot of funding, also community funding, cohesion funding and social funding.
Let's put that to Mark Reckless, as I mentioned your Eurosceptic credentials at the beginning of the programme, Mark. But in your constituency in Rochester, I think £1.5 million of European funding has come in just in the last 4 years.
Yes,
You want to throw all that away?
Well, we've paid far more into Europe than we get back. £19 billion more last.
No, Kent doesn't pay £19 billion.
Well, I think Kent pays an even more disproportionate bit than the country
billion.
as a whole, given the amount we pay into the national exchequer. But Ms. Bearder refers to this study and says, it's Department of Business. Of course, that's run by her Liberal Democrat colleague Vince Cable.
He's
cited this study.
in there as well.
When people have looked into this study and actually gone and spoken to the author of it, he says, oh no, that's quite wrong. We're not going to lose 3 million jobs or 500,000. Actually, it might be positive, and I've been misquoted. But the study, you can't use it for those purposes. You just keep on making it up.
The risk is, are you going to risk it, even if it's half that number? Is that what you really want for this country, or are you actually going to say, look, we are part of a bigger unit, and jobs for this country are absolutely vital, as they are for the rest of Europe? Are we actually going to say, what do you do on day 2 when you're outside the European Union?
Well, I would like to trade freely with the whole world.
But you will have to trade freely.
Could I finish, please?
Sensible pie in the sky
Let's
stuff.
bring Steve.
Could I make that point? Come on.
Okay, answer that question. I'll let you answer that question.
I
What
would
do you
like
do on
to
day
trade.
2?
I would like to trade freely with the whole world. So instead of being tied to one declining continent that accounts for less than a fifth of output now, compared to a third even 20 years ago, I would like to trade with the big emerging economies of China and India. I'd like to negotiate our own free trade deals with them that put British interests first and use access to our market, particularly in sensitive areas like agriculture, to lever open access to their market for our traded international financial and service industries. That's what Britain needs for jobs in this country.
I'm going to come back to Catherine in a moment, but Steve, you're also a big fan of staying in, aren't you? Unlike Ed Miliband, we're not quite sure where he is.
I think that it's important that we have the trading relationship with Europe. It's right there. It's on our doorstep. I think this obsession that the Tories have got with Europe is bizarre in the extreme. They should be concentrating on jobs and growth. And I think the notion that we're somehow going to create a referendum in 4 years' time, when we don't know what the issues for Europe are going to be, is a really rather bizarre thing to raise as an issue now. And frankly, I read John Cridland in the Guardian this morning, the CBI Director General, and he is incredibly critical of this government's approach to Europe. He says they're obsessed. He says that you should be concentrating on the real things, the real economy, and get people back into work. Those are the right things for us to be doing now.
You talked about business. What about voters? What about your constituents? I mean, YouGov, I think, have said that it's something like number 11 on the list of concerns, priorities that voters have. Is it genuinely something that people who voted for you
Well, if you look at those lists of concerns, you'll find that number 2 is immigration. And, of course, it's because of our membership of the European Union that all these million people or so from Poland and other Eastern European countries have been able to come here, and that next year we have the prospect of Romanians and Bulgarians being able to come here without controls. I think we should control our borders. We should decide in our country democratically
at this
who
point.
should come here. I think we should be an independent country. I think that people should be allowed to vote on that.
Who would staff our care homes, clean the hospitals, pick the fruit, which, as you know, is a huge part of the economy in Kent, if we didn't have that immigration?
I think we should train people locally. The millions of people who are unemployed, including the young people, they should have training. We shouldn't just have employers going straight to the easy option of bringing in people from abroad each time. We should invest on our own people.
There's nothing wrong with what Mark's saying. Of course we should train local British workers, but we've benefited enormously from our membership of the EU, and I think that the change culturally in our country over the last 30 years has been incredibly beneficial. If we throw away those important trading links with Europe, and we cannot, overnight build new trading links with big markets in China and India, heaven knows your Prime Minister's been trying, then I think our economy will be seriously damaged. And that's why I think now public opinion is beginning to shift, and though it might be the 11th or 10th concern at the minute, people are now beginning to worry that by the Tory policy of taking us sleepwalking out of Europe, we will be in serious economic decline.
We need public opinion and have a referendum.
Catherine
a couple of things I really need to put on that. The migrants that come from the rest of Europe are net taxpayers. They are a benefit to this community, and they pay in. They do not take out, and there is a surplus, and there's a report out this week that actually demonstrates that. The other point that I want wanted to come back on was we can negotiate trade deals with China and the rest of the world. We are a country of 65 million people. What sort of clout do you have when you're negotiating with China? Or do you want to be a negotiating partner with 500 million people and have that sort of clout? That's what the European Union does. It is the world's biggest market. We would be crazy to cut ourselves off from that and to invite tariffs and from the rest of the world. We would spend the next 20 years negotiating with the world on trade deals.
I'm afraid, Catherine Beard, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, the Labour Party celebrated in Hastings 2 weeks ago and they won 7 out of 8 seats on East Sussex County Council. But across the county border in Thanet, where the district council is Labour-run, the party was expected to take seats from the Conservatives. It ended up with only 1. UKIP, of course, took the other 7. Well, Hastings and Thanet are similar areas, both relatively impoverished seaside towns with a strong working-class presence. So why did the Labour Party do well in one and badly in the other? Lucinda Adam has been to find out.
Hastings and Thanet, 2 seaside resorts and 2 of the most deprived parts of the southeast. Both have Labour-led local councils and both were key targets for Labour to win back county council seats at this month's elections. In Hastings, Labour celebrated a landmark victory, taking 42% of the vote and 7 out of 8 county council seats. But in Thanet, they failed to make any gains, holding just 1 seat, while the other 7 gave UKIP its strongest victory. In local by-elections held last week, UKIP gained a 2nd seat on Thanet District Council and one on Ramsgate Town Council in a ward that had been a Labour stronghold, leaving the local Labour Party in even deeper water. So why were the party's fortunes so mixed? Like Thanet, unemployment in Hastings is 3 times the national average. Both areas suffer from a seasonal jobs market, high numbers of older people, and inward migration from people seeking cheap accommodation. The Labour parliamentary candidate for Hastings put success here down to a strong Labour majority on the council, achieving goals to regenerate the town.
We had a record of delivery that we could point towards. We've got a council which is proactive in tackling the jobs issue that we have down here. They started out an apprenticeship programme. They were looking to do 100 in 100 days, and actually they exceeded that. They got 160 apprenticeships in 100 days. We have them looking to do up the town, to really invest in the town. They've ordered over 600 properties to do up the frontage.
But in Thanet, UKIP says progress on regeneration projects has been sluggish, and Labour councillors haven't supported expansion at Manston Airport.
The regeneration plan clearly indicates that the airport is a major regeneration opportunity. And you don't need the brains of the Norway George to work that out. But they're against it. So they are doing everything they can to restrict the operation at Manston. Since KLM went in, 42 new jobs have been created. We've got a world-class airline operating there. The majority of the people in Thanet really want the airport to be a success.
When the former Conservative leader of Thanet District Council, Sandy Ezekiel, was jailed for misconduct just weeks before polling day, Labour should have capitalised. But a series of defections and infighting between councillors has caused trouble and distraction for Labour leaders.
The infighting in Thanet has been a great problem, and it's really been a consequence of having a minority administration which has been virtually controlled by the interests of only a handful of independent councillors in key positions. And that's caused for a great deal of squabbling. We spend a great deal of time in council meetings actually arguing about issues which have absolutely nothing to do with the business of a local council.
To win people's confidence and their votes, campaigning was widespread in Hastings. But in Thanet, Labour focused its efforts on Margate, and it was UKIP who knocked on doors elsewhere.
There will not be a street in Thanet that has not been visited by one of our now elected members. I certainly didn't see any Labour. In fact, Labour didn't even put out a leaflet in my ward. They didn't. There was no targeting at all, and nobody knew who the Labour candidate was.
The only Labour councillor who won in Thanet admits the party was complacent in targeting marginal seats and failing to campaign in traditional Labour areas.
What that means is that you're not putting the same effort into some of your strongholds. So what that's meant is that when a party like UKIP has come along with a message that chimes with a certain set of voters, it causes problems for all parties, which is exactly what's happened here. And I think it's a bit of a wake-up call that we need to be talking to, the voters in all seats and not just a certain set of seats.
Two similar areas, but two very different stories for Labour. What does the party have to do to win back voters in Thanet, so its popularity here isn't washed away for good?
Lucinda Adam reporting. Well, joining us now is the Labour group leader of Kent County Council, Gordon Cowan. Now, you've had a couple of weeks to think about this, Mr Cowan. What do you think went wrong here? Was it a missed opportunity, or did you just take Labour supporters for granted in Thanet?
Absolutely not. I think in Thanet, if you look at the results in Thanet, actually, the UKIP was 8% in 2009 and 39% in 2013, and in actual fact the Labour vote held up, in fact increased by 2%. Were we happy with that? Of course not, because we did want to win those Thanet seats. We did want to get 20 plus on Kent County Council. Of course we did marvellously well. We got 13, we had 3 previously.
I don't think anyone, forgive me, would say that was doing marvellously well. I mean, UKIP, those votes in Thanet have cost you the opposition on Kent County Council. If Labour are going to get back into power in 2 years' time, Thanet is exactly the kind of place where they need to win seats.
Well, it is, absolutely, but this particular time, if you go back to 2009, it was the Conservatives that had quite control of Thanet, in fact control of the Thanet District Council. Labour was really one of the heartlands that Labour wanted to win, and of course we're disappointed we only got 1 seat out of the 8 on offer. But if you look at the results and you look at the percentages results, Labour's vote held up, but we didn't quite get as many votes as what we would like to get more councillors on Kent County Council.
Where do you go from here then? As I say, all eyes now on 2 years' time on the general election. What do you do locally as a party? Because it sounds like you're not doing well enough to get the seats, to get that springboard to a general election victory.
Well, of course, we have to listen to the electorate, and the electorate will give a clear message out this time. They'll give a clear message out, but I think that message is more of a message to the central government that, quite frankly, whether it's immigration, whether it's the Europe in and out situation, the people want to have answers, and they want real answers, and we've got to try and get that message. I'll be relaying that message to my leader, Ed Miliband, and of course we've got to get a clear understanding about Europe and the direction we're going.
You seem to be blaming the Conservatives for you not winning enough seats in Thanet.
Absolutely.
But could it be that you just weren't out there knocking on doors like UKIP were and talking to people and showing them that you were there, that you were listening to their concerns and therefore getting their votes?
Well, I can assure you that all my councillors, all my members who stood, were knocking on doors and knocked on every door and sent out at least 2 leaflets to every single door within the Thanet area. So it wasn't about not knocking on doors. I think the overall picture throughout the country was one of a protest vote from UKIP to not just Thanet but the whole of the country.
Well, Steve, you were campaigning in Hastings, so you're going to take credit for the victories there?
No, I mean, Hastings has got a superb Labour Party. It's brilliantly led. It's got a very busy and active parliamentary candidate.
And Thanet hasn't. Do you think that's what's going on here?
Maybe. I think there's probably something in the water in Thanet. Politics there seems a bit sort of scrambled up. The Tories don't do terribly well. In fact, I think there are 2 Tory groups on the district council. Clearly, there are organisational issues to be addressed. The results for Labour were patchy in some parts of the country. We made tremendous progress in Hastings. Gordon makes a good point that our vote did hold up in Thanet, and there are a lot of marginal seats there. We have about half the district counclers, I think.
Yes, it's a minority-led.
Yeah, it's a minority-led thing. Parties do have patchy results, and we've
got 2 years to go. What does Ed Miliband learn from the Thanet Hastings comparison? What does he do now to make sure? Because if those people vote the same way, you're not going to get into number 10.
Well, clearly we've got to get our messages absolutely right for politics nationally, and dilute them, well, not dilute them, but making sure they work locally. We've got to strengthen our organisation. We've got to ensure that people do get the message, that we drive people out onto the doorsteps and we get the message out. Now, Hastings, it's working very well, and I'm sure Thanet, because I know they've got a good reputation and track record, will be not far behind them.
Mark, this isn't comfortable for you as a party either. I mean, there's a wide expectation that Nigel Farage may choose to stand for Parliament in Thanet because he's done so well there. Who are you more scared of, him or Labour?
Well, I don't want to intrude on Labour grief, and frankly, if Labour are pleased that their votes held up in Thanet, that's all right. I think that's very good news for the two good Conservative MPs there, in Roger Gale and Laura Sands. But the message I take is, you've got to be out there on the doorstep, and I'm campaigning this weekend, and the message I'm picking up so much on the doorstep are people really concerned about immigration, particularly the Romanian, Bulgarian immigration potentially next year. So on Monday I'm actually going to Romania. I've got a meeting with the Romanian Prime Minister of all people, and I'm trying to see what we can do to
But it sounds like, coming back to Thanet, it sounds as though it's the calibre of local councillors, many of whom have been Conservatives, one of which we just heard has got into quite a lot of trouble, has put people off politics, and that's why they're arguably going to UKIP.
Well, my impression in Thanet is that Labour have pretty much given up as a campaigning force there, and I think at the parliamentary level, I think there's strong Conservative representation with Roger and Laura, and I think they'll be building on the results we've seen, and that they're going to be in strong positions to get re-elected in 2015.
Two people at least disagree with you there, but I'm afraid we're going to have to move on. It's now time for a roundup of the week's other political events with Lucinda Adam.
Brighton's bin men are back at work, but their unofficial strike action over pay has caused disputes between the city's Green councillors, with calls from some for leader Jason Kitcat to resign. The Deputy Prime Minister has told Eastbourne MP Stephen Lloyd the government will look into decisions to downgrade local maternity services.
I will ask the Secretary of State for Health to discuss this matter with him further.
Dover MP Charlie Elphick has called on Parliament to clamp down on live animal exports, which recently restarted at the town's port.
They are bad for animal welfare and bad for the local economy.
Sussex Police have begun a drive to recruit more Eastern European language speakers to become police community support officers.
The Eastern European community understand better our job. It builds a very good link with us as a law enforcement institution.
And it's the most littered shoreline in the country, but Dover's Shakespeare Beach doesn't have many visitors. Environmentalists say it's rubbish from abroad that's being washed up on the tide.
Mark Reckless, what do you think about the idea of these funded police community liaison officers to deal with migrants?
Well, clearly, I mean, if there are particular issues, we have to ensure that all communities are policed properly. But I'd like to see us investing more in our young people here, and particularly ensuring that next year we don't see the sort of numbers of people coming from Bulgaria and Romania that we saw under Labour from Poland and others.
And Lord Basson, we heard about Shakespeare Beach, but Brighton came out, I think, as number 6 for litter in the country because of the number of people that come to the beach and leave it behind. I know Mike Weatherly, one of the Conservative MPs, would like the government to do more to promote anti-litter campaigning. What do you think?
I think that's a bit of a gimmick, really. Frankly, I'd prefer to see the local council do its job, clear up the plastic and glass on the beach and increase its recycling rate, which is appallingly low.
Even though it's a Green Council?
Even though it's a Green Council. I left that one to you.
I know, it was an open goal, wasn't it? Thanks very much to both my guests. That's it for the Sunday Politics in the South East. We won't be here next week. We'll be back the week after, though. Now it's back to Andrew.